Welcome to Parent Council's Meet the Candidates Night. Parent Council is made up of the PTO presidents of John Jay High School, John Jay Middle School, and all three elementary schools, Katona, Meadow Pond, and Increase Miller. We meet monthly with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent and a board member. Tonight, you will hear from each of the two candidates. They will give a personal statement. The members of Parent Council will be asking questions. Each candidate will get a maximum of 2 minutes to answer each question. And then the candidate who speaks first will get 1 minute to respond. We will also be having a Q&A at the end. If you have any questions for the candidates, please send in your question. We will set aside 10 minutes at the end of the hour so that the public can get their questions answered as well. Let's begin with the candidates, each giving a personal statement and introducing themselves. Alana, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Alana Schneier, and I'm really excited to be here with some familiar faces and a lot of new faces also. My name is Alana. I've lived in the district for 3 years, and I have 3 children, a 3rd grader, a 1st grader, and a 15-month-old. And I'm really excited to be here and running for the school board. This year, I think it's been a really different year from any other year, right? It's been pretty hard with COVID. Yet the schools have been a place that's provided a sense of security and normalcy in a very abnormal year. And I feel incredibly grateful for all the people that have worked to make that happen. I know that for me, kids going back to school 5 days a week has been a game changer. And seeing how important the school was over the past year really solidified my interest in trying to give back to the schools and add my perspective to the board. I think I'd be bringing a unique perspective as the only parent on the board with elementary school children and a future elementary school student. And I also have an interesting background that I think would be beneficial to the board. So I run my own consulting company that helps nonprofits, government, and small businesses do their work more impactfully. And a part of my practice is capacity building. Another part of it is meeting facilitation. Another part of it is public relations. So I do work directly with the government. I'm a registered lobbyist. I run campaigns, and I do a lot of education around how bills become laws, how the budgeting process works at the city and state level, and why voting is important. And so I'm really excited to bring that professional experience to the board. And I also bring the experience as a parent. I have 3 young children, and what it's like to kind of come into the district as a working parent, as a 2-parent household that's working. And I think that there's a lot, I feel very grateful to be in a district where the students are clearly the priority of the district, a district that's very functional. And I think with that functionality, we can do even more. So I'm really excited to kind of build on the commitment to quality that this district has by thinking about quality as more than just test scores. I'm really excited to work on transparency. I love that the meetings have been online over the past year, and I think we can do even more to make it so that parents can participate in school board meetings. I'm really glad that we've done a lot around inclusion over the last year, particularly around language inclusion, that all communication has gone out this year in English and Spanish. And I think there's probably more that we can do for our English language learners in the community. And I think there's even more that we can do around safety. We've done a great job keeping our kids physically safe. And I think we can do more, build on what we've done around internet safety in particular, and do more of that. So I'm excited to work on those issues with everybody. And I'm excited to bring my background working. I've worked in government. I worked for the State Assembly for a while, and I've worked in nonprofits for a while. So I've worked on all sides of this, and I'm really excited to bring that experience to the board. So happy to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you very much. Marjorie, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much to Parent Council for hosting this forum and for inviting us to talk with you this evening. For those who don't know me, I grew up on Long Island and attended Mount Sinai Public Schools, where my mom had a long career as a 4th grade teacher in my school district. I have been influenced throughout my life by the importance and value of education and pride in public schools. I earned my bachelor's degree from Duke University and a master's degree from the University of Michigan. All of my own work has involved higher education, selective college admissions, and working with students as they transition from high school to college. My family has lived in our school community for more than 15 years. We moved here from Charlottesville, Virginia after we had our first child to be closer to extended family. And I first ran for the Board of Education when our son was a first grader at Meadow Pond and our daughter was in preschool. I have served for 3 terms and as board president or vice president for the past 8 of 9 years. I take the responsibility of representing each of you and your children very seriously, and I'm proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish together on behalf of all Katonah-Lewisboro students. Much of this work over time has helped bring our community's identity and values into focus, implementing full-day kindergarten and healthier start times at our secondary schools, improving both security measures and sustainable practices in our school buildings, hiring our wonderful superintendent, refocusing on equity, inclusivity, and racial justice, expanding extracurricular and internship opportunities for students, and fostering innovation in our classrooms. In addition to serving on our local board, I also serve on the board of directors and the executive committee for the Westchester-Putnam County School Board Association. This experience helps to foster advocacy efforts that directly benefit our students and public education, and it ensures that our school district is well positioned to make decisions that are informed by best practices in our region. It has also helped us to build valuable relationships with school board members at peer districts, as well as with local elected officials on whose partnership and policies we depend. All of this work has taught me many things that I'm not sure that I could have fully understood, and especially that the key issues facing our school community cannot be easily predicted in advance. In this constantly changing environment in which we live, adaptability is as much our own imperative as it is our children's. And also that our ability to succeed is entirely dependent on trust and a shared sense of purpose. I'm seeking another term on our board because I continue to believe that I have experience and skills that can help us adapt, preserve trust, and continue to grow into an even better school system for our community. I'm looking forward to discussing some of this experience with you this evening and to listening and responding to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. Okay, we will now begin the question portion of our forum. Okay, Taryn, would you like to start with the first question? And then if everybody in Parent Council can just then flow to the next question, that would be great.
Okay, that sounds good. Hi, I'm Taryn Kendall. Good evening, everyone. I'm representing the John Jay Middle School PTO this evening. And here's my question. With respect to KLSD affairs and the dynamics of the school board, are you an agent of change or status quo, and why?
Okay, so then Marjorie, would you like to go first? And then we'll have Alana then respond.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the question. I think I would start by saying that most school board candidates start out as agents of change. I think all of us are motivated to run for school board by something else, some extra dimension that we feel we can bring to make our schools even better than we perceive them to be as community members and parents. And in my own experience, I don't think that I have ever lost sight of wanting to continuously change and work toward improving our schools. But I think I also would say that for me, the locus of change over time really has been in the shift from one superintendent to another, and that once Katonah-Lewisboro had hired a superintendent who could so effectively unify our school district and move us forward on behalf of all students, sort of that the need for more gross change on a macro level started to dissipate, and I moved into probably more what I would refer to as a refined change agent position, where I'm as focused on trying to build consensus with other board members and support the great work of our superintendent as I am on any independent initiative that I personally might really wish to change or move forward.
Ilana, would you like to respond?
Sure. I think Marjorie, it's really interesting to hear your perspective, especially having served on the board so long, that you kind of start with one idea and then as you're on it for longer, your position changes and what you do changes. I would say that I'm probably somebody that would be both. I mean, there's a lot of things about the district that I want to continue that I think a lot of us really like about the school district, right? It's committed to our children. It's well-resourced. There's a lot of, I feel like in some ways, there's a lot of room for parent input, and it's very responsive to parents, I've found. And there's probably things that we could be doing better. So I think some of the things that I spoke about before that we could do better, one that has been challenging for me as an elementary school parent is the late start time for schools. And I think I've heard that from other parents. 9:30 for working parents is challenging if you don't have a parent with a flexible schedule or a parent who's staying at home to kind of do that. So that would be something that I'd be interested in exploring, some creative solutions to how we kind of make it more accessible for two-parent working households at the elementary school level. So that's one example. And I think that I'm somebody who, when it comes to change, is somebody who knows how to work through a lot of different systems. So I've worked in education in a lot of different ways. And when I worked for the state assembly, I worked for the assembly member who wrote the Dignity for All Students Act. And one thing that we were doing when I was working for him was exploring ways to make sure that it was being implemented effectively. And we designed a curriculum for pre-teacher certification to help teachers better be able to work and be advocates for the Dignity for All Students Act. So that's one way that I've sort of been an agent for change that kind of supports what's already there, but helps it to do it a little bit better. And that's some of the things that I think I'd be working on. Is that a phone for time?
Yes, you're at 30 seconds.
Yeah, so those are two kind of areas that I think that I'd be doing that in. Another area, so that's another area is just around language inclusion. I mean, I had this experience when I went to the kindergarten orientation where there was a family from my daughter's preschool, and she did not speak English, and there was nobody there to offer language interpretation at the orientation. And so I think just sort of being somebody that would ask questions about that, to really ask, how are we being inclusive? How do we bring more people in? And not just say you come, but we want to invite you into the process. We want to invite you into our schools, into the school board process, into the community. So that's an area where I'd like to be an agent of change.
And Marjorie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. I think what I would add is that it's actually very hard to think about changes that we might wish to move forward or advocate for right now, because I think that many of us are feeling change exhaustion, which is to say that there has been so much dramatic change imposed on every aspect and dimension of school, for every child, for every family, for every staff member, that I think part of the work that lies ahead for the district is really taking a step back and reflecting on the ways in which everything that we now do has been affected by changes that we didn't ask for or ever could have hoped for. So I hope that we're able to bring about some really positive changes for students, but I'm not sure that I can say that I'm bringing the spirit of wanting to have been the change agent. I think it's actually more of a little bit of a time to take stock and to reflect on how the change that we've had to adapt to has caused us to educate differently, and how we can move forward and embrace some aspects of that change to do the very best for every child in the new environment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to question number 2.
Okay.
And Ilana, if you'd like to answer this first.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Joe Ziegler, and I represent the PTO at the high school. I'm the PTO president. Question. We've adapted and learned a lot from the pandemic as a school district. How are we going to build back better? What do you think KLSD should keep, and what should KLSD do away with in the future school year? Reflecting on the past year and a half of a completely different way to educate our children. And so what worked, what will we keep, and what might, in a non-pandemic world, what we might keep, and what are we happy to lose?
I think that's a great question. And thanks for asking. I actually wrote a letter to the Record Review a couple weeks ago about this very question. And while I have my answers, I think it would be really much more interesting to hear it from all parents in the community, to have a parent forum where we really gather that information from multiple perspectives, from parents of different types of learners, about what worked over the past year and what didn't work over the past year. So I can speak from my experience and what I've observed in my children's classes. But I think to really have a whole district perspective, you have to have a whole district conversation. And I didn't mention this earlier, but my background is actually as a community organizer and as somebody who brings people together from multiple perspectives and facilitates, because I deeply believe that when you bring more voices to the table, you get a much better outcome. And I think that's what democracy is all about. And I think that's exactly what we want to be teaching our children. And I've seen that, but I think we can do it more. And so I think that would be the best way to answer that question. So from my perspective and what I've seen, I think there were some things about remote learning that worked really well for certain students, right? Being able to have flexibility, being able to control their own time, being able to kind of go off on tangents in their own directions for their own research. That really worked well for some students. And for some students, it was a total disaster, right? Like that independent learning just in front of a screen did not work. And I think the district recognized that early and brought back those students who needed to be in the classroom. And that's incredibly commendable. And I would want to build on that and think about, how do we bring that back in as we're bringing students back? How do we help the students that have fallen really far behind to help bring them back up? And how do we engage the students that have excelled over the past year, actually, and keep them engaged so they're not bored in the classroom? And I think to do that, we have to ask the parents what they think their students need. We have to ask the teachers what they think the students need. And we have to ask the administration what they need. And then those answers go to the board, and we as the board need to make a budget that supports the needs of everyone in the district. And so that would be my answer for that.
Thank you. Marjorie, would you like to respond?
Thank you. I think I would start by saying that I really agree that there does have to be community-wide participation in reflecting on the year and gathering feedback on what worked well and how families envision that we might move forward. That being said, with regard to a couple of specific things that I would just mention, it's almost hard to remember life before we had a learning management platform, but the lightning speed with which Schoology was implemented last summer is really something that I think many people who've worked in schools could never have believed, but not for the pandemic, that this software could be procured, implemented, and rolled out K through 12 in every building and every level of the district. And I think in some ways, just to focus on Schoology as one very specific change that we've all experienced, we could also talk about Zoom. We could talk about so many very specific dimensions of how learning is different. But I think there's a lot to unpack with Schoology. I've attended many, many PTO forums this school year. And one takeaway that I have is that I think there's a conversation to be had around communication and the reality that just because some parents are in the habit maybe of checking grades in Schoology or getting some data or feedback on their students in Schoology, it doesn't change the necessity and the importance of communication directly with teachers and conversation with teachers. And there's never been a time where I haven't had an issue bothering me related to one of my own children's experiences that hasn't been really changed in terms of how I've thought about it by just reaching out for a conversation. So I think that just even thinking about how some of the technology has affected us and what aspects of the change are helpful to us in our own children's education and what aspects of it maybe we need to reflect on and think about how do we want to use the technology going forward, but also think about other opportunities to change or improve communication. And again, the learning management platform is just one example of so many. I think that was my tone, and I'll stop there for the moment unless you want me to keep going.
No, that's fine. Ilana, would you like to add to Marjorie's?
Sure, yeah, I would love to build on that. I think the technology is a really interesting part of this whole past year, right? It forced us to use tools that we kind of been like, looking at, but not really diving into. And we had to dive in and use them, right? So I think the technology, there's ways that we should continue to use technology in the classroom to the ways that it augments what it is, but hopefully we don't have to have it as the substitute for the in-classroom experience, right? Because that didn't work for a lot of students, though for some it did. I think relatedly, it was amazing that the district gave iPads to everybody, right? Like that really increased accessibility and everybody to be able to do remote learning for the most part, right? The district really made sure that everybody had a tool to actually be able to do remote learning, and it would not have worked had we not done that, right? With that, I think we need to build on some of the things that we did related to internet safety, right? So the kids had a lot of unrestricted access, at least my children did, on their iPads to YouTube and to other digital platforms like Chrome, where they're kind of leaving digital footprints behind. And I think we could do more student education and parent education on internet safety related to that. And so I would love to build on that over the last year. I know it's part of the library curriculum now, and I think we need to kind of expand that. I remember Kathy and we did a workshop for IMES parents a couple of years ago before this on that. Who knew that we were going to be diving, where the advice in it was like, kids don't need screen time. And then the next year we're like on screens all the time.
So true. Yeah, we had no idea. Actually, I think it was November. Was it February? It was February. Then we went into the pandemic in March. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So thank you. The next question, Ina's going to ask.
Hi,
We'll start. Oh, sorry, Ina. And I think next, Marjorie will go first.
Hi, I'm Ina Rabinowitz. I represent Increase Miller. We continue to see diversity, equity, and inclusion discussed at a national level and within our district. How will your role on the board promote diversity in our schools and community?
How will our role on the board
Help promote.
this work? I think I would start just by saying that I think for me, even in preparing any thoughts for tonight, most of what I do or think or believe is just informed by what I read. I think that as school board members, we have to be proponents of education and of reading. And I think we, as a school board, can engage in additional dimensions of modeling conversations to help our students feel more comfortable engaging in conversations around equity and access to resources. I think that the state of New York has done a good job providing a framework for culturally responsive, sustaining education, and we are doing a lot in our school district already to facilitate conversation with our stakeholder committee. The board is waiting for some recommendations to come out of that committee. And we have many staff members and many student groups who are really waiting for us to take the lead in this work and to figure out what's my role and how can I do my part. I think that where it's complicated for school boards is that the very structure of public education in our country and in the state of New York is predicated on some inequalities, and it's really up to us to help communities understand how resources are allocated across school districts and how within Katonah-Lewisboro we can raise consciousness of the resources that we have and our responsibility to help students to understand when they graduate from Katonah-Lewisboro and our citizens themselves, how they can better foster a righting of inequality that we've all inherited and that bring us to where we are today.
Ilana.
Yeah, so I think diversity, equity, inclusion is incredibly important. And when I was in middle school, I participated in an academic competition called Future Problem Solving. And when we got to the state championship in Katonah, and I grew up in New York City at New York City Public Schools. and I'm a public school graduate. The question was, how do we make more diversity, equity, and inclusion in our future? And we kind of, my team got together and we thought about we sort of framed it as the underlying question of how do we celebrate diversity in our culture, in our communities? And how do we hold that up? And I think that's a key way that we kind of think about this, that it's not a burden. It actually, in the same way that bringing more voices to the table leads to better policy, bringing more voices from different perspectives does that. So a couple things that come to mind. My most proud project as a consultant was doing the Hack League in New York City with the Department of Education and their Computer Science for All initiative, which is trying to get computer science into every school by 2025. And it does that by training teachers, particularly in schools that are Title I schools and underrepresented schools that don't have computer science education. So I was involved in a team that redesigned the curriculum for the Hack League to use civics to teach computational thinking. And we taught teachers this curriculum. They ran competitions at their schools. The winners of the schools came to a borough-wide competition, and the borough-wide winners came to a citywide competition, which we held inside City Hall. So, but I'll just quickly sum up that experience, because we were targeting students not traditionally involved in computer science, we had the outcome of the winners of those competitions were students who had not traditionally been involved, because we were focusing on that. And we had that outcome because we had that explicit intention. And so I think intention is very important in how we think about doing diversity, equity, inclusion. Was that the bell? Did I hear that?
You might have to turn it up a little bit, Angela. Okay.
What? So I also add that one thing I'm also really proud of when I worked for the State Assembly is I helped to get the first woman of color who was a current public school parent and a public school graduate onto the Board of Regents, who's now the Manhattan Regent. So I just think that there's a lot of different ways that you do this. It's in leadership, it's in curriculum, it's in teaching kids, and it's in doing cultural celebrations at the community level. My favorite event in high school was the food fair at our school, where people made food from all over the world. And it was like an amazing way to interact and learn about different cultures in a very visceral, fun way. So I think, I think at all levels is where you do that work.
Thank you. Marjorie, would you like to build on that?
I do agree that it really has to be a school district-wide, system-wide approach to this work. And I think, what's hard for me in this question is, what is the role of the board? And I guess because the board, really is the corporate body for the school district, it's got to be something beyond just individual board members and their voices. And I guess I think back to every year in the fall, we set a board goal, and that really has been our opportunity to signal to our superintendent and to our community and to reflect the values that we believe are important to our community. So this year, for example, we modified the board goal to be more explicit about fostering a learning environment that values shared responsibility, which is really what Ilana is speaking about, responsibility at all levels to promote equity and justice for all in preparing students for our democracy, which really is why we're here. That's the purpose of a public school district.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to question number 4 with Veronica. And Ilana will go first.
Hi, my name is Veronica Skrellia, and I am the Meadow Pond PTO president. And my question is, what do you think are the strengths of KLSD, and what challenges do you think KLSD is facing?
So I think there's a lot of strengths of the district. I think the real strength is that everybody in the district is committed to helping our students do their best and be their best, and really fostering, thinking about what they need to be engaged citizens in the 21st century world. What skills do they need to have? At the elementary school level, I really see a very intense focus on reading, writing, and math early on. So those foundational skills that help you kind of move on and do lots of things. I'm really coming from the city, always very impressed with the physical plant of the schools and the space and the beauty of it. I think having spacious environment creates a great learning environment. I love the adaptation that's happened with kids coming back and using the outdoor space even more than we have in the past. Like I would love to see even more of that. I think a lot of us are up here because we love the outdoors, right? Would love our students to be outside as much as possible. I think our teachers are incredible, and it seems like the teachers have a very good relationship with the school district and the administration, and that's a wonderful thing. And I found the teachers to be very responsive. And so I think that's unbelievable. This classroom size is really great. The small classes and the attention on that. I mean, the board has been really great over the last year. It seems very functional since I've been here. I would love to keep building on that. I think a functional board helps us do all types of things. One of my favorite things that the district is doing is the innovation cohort that they've been created with teachers to help teachers kind of explore new curriculum and explore different ways of teaching in the classroom. I think supporting teachers is the way that we have better schools. I mean, the teachers are the ones that are interacting with our students. And I mean, I've seen so much support for the teachers over this Teacher Appreciation Week. So I really want to kind of keep highlighting that. Some areas where, I mean, there's always room for growth, right? There's many things you can do better. And I think it's sort of what's a priority. I really want to highlight what Marjorie said earlier. This year has been unprecedented. I know that people are really at their edge. You know, the district has done all it can because people have been at capacity with so many changes happening all the time. So I think any changes with that in mind, you know, I'm coming with a fresh perspective and a new energy. And I think that would be good for the board with new ideas. And so my biggest thing that I would love to see is a little bit at the elementary school level, more of a science and social studies curriculum earlier on. I just think we could do more of that.
Okay, great. And Marjorie, would you like to respond?
Sure. I think that one of the challenges that we face is how to bring our families back to our schools. I think that in the same way that there's a lot to think about with regard to the effects of a learning management platform or technology and its impact on how we're educating students now, I also think that although we're not quite there yet and we still need to bring our ship to the shore, so to speak, at some point with so many people being vaccinated, we are going to want to ask ourselves, you know, what do we want and expect for our schools with respect to parents being able to be in the schools or up at the schools with their children. I think this is probably more of an issue at the elementary level than at the secondary level, but even at the secondary level, I think that people in our community value education and want to be involved in their children's education. And I think it's going to be a challenge that'll be with us for a while as to what does that mean or look like for parents. And it'll probably involve, you know, some hybrid version of using technology and hopefully being able to enable parents to be back up at school or potentially in the classrooms. It's interesting where Ilana left off. I actually would say something somewhat similar with regard to social studies and ELA, but I might say it a little bit differently, which is to say that I sometimes have the feeling, and this isn't unique to Katonah-Lewisboro, I think it's more reflective of school ethos more generally, but that ELA and social studies are somewhat subverted to math and science, and that even at the secondary level as well, there's sometimes a mindset that, you know, we're going to lighten up the load on ELA and social studies because these kids really need to focus on their math and science. And I think that's a conversation that can be had around you know, the messages that we're sending to students and what we value and want to prioritize and how to make sure that we're doing justice to every subject area to the best of our ability. In terms of the things that are terrific and that should stay, you know, I think we live in a community that has teachers that could not be more dedicated or committed to educating our students. I think we've really seen that in the past year. Everybody has worked so hard to collaborate and to be creative, and you know, we have a community of families who really care about education. And I'm sorry, but I'm distracted because I can't tell whether I heard the bell and you're looking at me like I should stop, or
Yeah, you can, if you can wrap it up.
I'm so
Yes.
sorry. I thought that might have happened, but
It's
it's a
okay.
little hard to hear the
It's
tone.
hard
So
to hear. She's
I
trying to.
apologize.
And do you know what? I will definitely come into play in the future just to let you know, and I'll announce the 30 seconds if it's hard to hear the bell. My
Yeah,
apologies.
that would be great. Thanks, Angela. Okay, great.
Do I get to respond for a
Yes,
moment?
you do. Mhm.
I just wanted to build on that more. I mean, what was the thing that was so exciting for me when I worked on the Hackley project was the interdisciplinary nature of the project. It was sort of co-curricular. It was we were teaching computational thinking through civics. So we were using math, science, logic, like all those kinds of skills. Students were looking at open data to identify opportunities or problems in their communities, using the data to justify and show it, doing data analysis, then building technology to address those problems in their communities, and then presenting it. So they were using so many different skills. And one teacher said at the end of it, this didn't solidify my students' sense that they could excel in the field of technology. I don't know what else would. So I think that how do we bring that excitement into the classroom? And I saw it in a stream fair at Increase Miller the other year. And I've seen it in certain parts of the curriculum that my kids are doing, especially in art, especially in music, especially in library, where it's bringing together all those different pieces and making it relevant, just like our learning commitment in the district says. And so I want to amplify that voice that I think is pretty prevalent in the community that supports us, so our teachers know that they can be creative in how they're teaching, and that we know that when teachers are creative and put that spark and that love of learning in our students excel, and our students do well on tests, and they become the engaged citizens that we want them to be in the world. So that's something I feel passionate about, and I think we're doing it, and we could do it even more.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to question number 5. And Marjorie will be the first to respond. Precious, do you want to go ahead and ask the question?
Yes, thank you. My name is Precious Knudsen-Ruppenstein. I am one of the KES PTO co-presidents this year. The question's a little bit lengthy, and there's a couple of different pieces. So to begin with, are you aware of this year's and recent years district and/or high school ranking reports? For example, in the latest U.S. News ranking from April 27th, 2021, it appears that John Jay High School does not rank as high as some of our comparable neighboring districts. We are number 56, while Byram Hills, Chappaqua, and some others are ranked higher. What are your thoughts on this? And do you have any interest in looking into the cause? And if appropriate, coming up with a plan to increase ratings for future studies?
I think I'd be interested in knowing what the criteria or the metrics are for the survey. I wouldn't discount the survey out of hand. I'd always be curious to know, what are we being rated on? What went into the equation? So I should start by saying I'm really not familiar with what goes into that ranking determination. It's interesting to know our ranking compared to some neighboring districts. So I would certainly be interested. I think depending on what the criteria are, that would inform the extent to which I thought we should be trying harder to work on certain aspects of our high school culture or curriculum to improve the ranking. If the criteria don't seem to be aligned with what our community values, then it would be less important. But if these are criteria that matter a lot to us, then that would be more motivation to figure out, well, then how can we do better? What I can say is that our high school offers a deep, extensive offering of not just rigorous AP courses, but also elective coursework, so that every student can find something to be excited about and to pursue and to master in high school, in addition to other programs that students can access through BOCES. And our students do very well. They graduate in great numbers, 99% graduation rate, and they go on. And when we survey them, they
30
report
more
back.
seconds.
Thank you. They report back very positive feelings about their experiences and the quality of the education that they earned while they were in our school district and at John Jay. So it would be surprising to me to think that we wouldn't rate very favorably compared to our peers. And again, I think that's why I would just be curious to know what the underlying metrics are about. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Perfect.
Okay, Ilana, go ahead and respond.
I mean, I agree with Marjorie, what Marjorie started with of like, what are these rankings based on? I don't know how to answer that question. Based on it, if we need to make adjustments or not. I went to a college, Reed College in Portland, Oregon, that refused to participate in those surveys because there are some problems in the way that they're kind of constructed sometimes. On the other hand, it's out there and it's something that has an effect, right? So one thing that I think it does probably have an effect on is people in our community where the school district ranking has to do with property values. And I think that's an important constituency that is relevant to the school board, right? People want, and members of the school, as well as we have a lot of people who don't have children in the school district anymore. And so the high ranking is important for that. But I think the real thing that we want is we want our schools to be delivering a quality education to our students. And that's the most important thing. So how we measure that is an interesting question. And so there's the perspective of what's the experience of our students? Where are they going afterwards? How are they engaging in the world? What's the experience of parents? What's the experience of teachers? What's the experience of the administration, right? Those would be things that would help us rank, how well our school is doing. What are kids doing after they graduate? How are they becoming engaged citizens? All those questions, that's what I'm more interested in. Do they have the skills to lead a functional life in the 21st century world? Are they creative thinkers? Are they critical thinkers? Those are the things that I think are really important. Can they be successful adults that take off from the nest, right? I think those are the questions. And are they healthy and balanced individuals also?
And Marjorie, would you like to build on that?
Sure. I think it's also safe to assume that a ranking of that nature probably is looking at test scores, whether it's Regents exam scores or some other standardized test measure that can be easily compared from one school district to the next. And so again, I think the conversation would then have to turn toward, what do we value? Are we driven by wanting to be in a certain percentile for every Regents exam? There's a statewide conversation happening right now about the future of Regents exams. Or do we place a premium on the reality that so many of our graduates report back that, yes, I had more than one teacher in my high school experience who really knew and cared about me, and who influenced my life path. And I'm not saying there's like an easy right or wrong. I don't think that this is simple or black and white, but I would just really want to know more about what's driving the rankings before I could form an opinion on whether it was something we should concern ourselves with or whether it was a reflection of some work we needed to do or not.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we hope that you guys will look into those rankings and at some point address, and you may already be doing that. But I agree with you that I agree with everything that you both said. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. I'm actually going to answer it, and I realized I did not introduce myself at the beginning. So my name is Kathy Martin. I am co-president with Ina at Increase Miller Elementary School. So then actually, Ilana, you're going to go first answering this question. As you may know, many of the community members feel that the board is out of touch with the concerns of the community members they serve. How can the board become more transparent and engaged with community members?
Thanks. So I have to say, I was not aware that the community feels that their board is out of touch. Is that based on something, Kathy, in particular? Or?
No, I mean, and I shouldn't say the whole community, but I think this past year has been very difficult because it seems very one-sided. I know, so we hear from parents, they'll send a letter in and the letter is read. And I think when they're in person, I know that the board does not have to respond to them, but it's their own voice to their own concerns. And we actually got a Q&A as well, similar to this question that we'll ask.
Okay, so that,
today.
yeah, that's helpful context. Yeah, I mean, this year's been difficult, right? I mean, I think all of us were thrown into a new way of interacting and a new mode of meeting. And I think people did the best that they could over the past year, right? And now, like we've said earlier, is a time to reflect and think about what we could do better and what we could do more of and what we want to do less of. So one suggestion I have is, particularly for the Board of Education meetings, that when we have the public comment section, that we make it more like a Zoom so people can ask their own questions. I think one thing that I noticed over the past year was, because it was a webinar with a Q&A, Kim does a wonderful job reading the questions, but it's not the same as coming from a parent, right? You don't get the same intensity, or from a community member, whoever's asking. You don't get it from their own voice, and people's own voice is very important. And we've been missing that over the past year. And I think it's led to some conversations becoming more confrontational than they need to be, and people having to submit petitions, for example, to get things done because they didn't feel heard, right? And that automatically creates a more adversarial relationship between the board and the community, where I don't think they're on different sides necessarily. So one suggestion I would have is to add that part of the meeting where it becomes more of an open forum, and actually you have discussion. And I don't know all the rules about this, and I look forward to learning them, but I think it would be nice if board members responded to questions as opposed to just listening, and kind of so that at least you know that it's heard. That's very important, right? And I think over the past year, one thing that was also hard for me, there were so many policies.
30 seconds.
Okay, I'll speed it up. There were so many policies that came out. It was hard to get an email Friday night and then have no forum for discussing and then digesting that, and no place for parent feedback to say this is working or this isn't. So I think we need to think about how we have more community conversations, whether that's led by the board or the board just attends and listens or whatever, but there needs to be more community conversations where there's parent input and live conversations where people get to engage and digest and suggest other ideas.
Thank you. Marjorie, would you like to respond?
Sure. I do think that there is a need for additional forums for parents to ask questions and to seek clarification. I do agree that there were so many iterations of our school model and of our school delivery that there were opportunities, for example, through PTO meetings or Board of Education meetings, just to name, sort of two standard forums that have been in existence. But this was a year where I think our community would have been well served by additional forums just to come and ask questions or to engage in conversation. There were times, for example, when I attended PTO meetings and actually probably myself felt similarly to the way that community members sometimes feel at board meetings, which is, well, when are they going to get through all this work so that we can just talk about the things that really matter to us? And I think that just speaks to the reality, not that anybody was, easy for me to say in my view, that I don't think people were leading their meetings wrong or doing their business wrong. I think that this was still the business that had to be accomplished. The Board of Education, for example, only meets every 2 weeks, and it must accomplish the certain business of the school district on behalf of all children. And it must really try to make sure that that work can happen, even if you have community members who have other very important issues that need to be heard and raised. And similarly, the PTO has its work that must happen and certain forums that it creates year after year. And I think in this year, and again, easier to say when the ship is almost to shore, but not quite yet, looking back, we did all have a need for more opportunity to communicate with each other, to ask our questions, and just to share experiences and learn how to get through what it is that we're getting through. So that's something that I think we can do better in the future. There's more that we could say certainly about the board meetings themselves, but I'll wait maybe until I have, or maybe I don't get another turn because this is it for me. So I guess I'm out of time.
That is your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Ilana.
Yeah, I'll just add on that I think the need for community conversations in the past year was very important, and we kind of missed that opportunity. Or, everybody was at their edge. I mean, everybody was at their capacity, right? Learning, having your children learning at home, working, even if you're not working, maybe dealing with the loss of a job, surviving during a global pandemic, right? It's been a tough year. And I think this is when we think about how we lean on each other and ask for help when we need it, right? So that we didn't have any of the learning cafes this past year, which have been really meaningful ways to have community conversations. And the district has been such a leader on important conversations through that forum, which I think is, for me, I got to learn about how they teach more and got to meet new neighbors, and it was wonderful. And I understand that the superintendent and the administration did not have capacity. But what would it have been like if we had asked some community leaders to take that on? Other people that might have had capacity, right? We never know what other people are doing until we start asking. And so, also, what would it be like to just sort of host an open meeting online, right? I think there's a number of tools that we could use and that I hope we use going forward. And even if it's not in the board capacity, maybe the board asks other people or empowers other parts of organization, of the administration to do that. And I think we can do more with that. And I know a lot of parents want to talk more, and it's been a hard year for them.
Yeah, thank you. I think all of those ideas would help. Maybe we do something. I think this is a great opportunity for us to ask you questions that parents have asked us and actually hear a direct response. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question that Angela is going to ask.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Garofalo. I am the president for the Special Education PTO. Thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate it. What do you feel, because we have a lot of students in the district who are served, whether it's with IEPs, 504s that fall into the general education setting, but children who need extra help in a variety of different ways, from your most severe to your specialized classrooms to, somebody who just may need some extra help in math. My question to you is, where do you think the board's 2 top priorities should really focus for children with special needs at this time?
And Marjorie goes first.
I think the board's, I don't want to say top priority, but I will say one reflection of the board's support or acknowledgement of the work that really is ongoing and needs to be done is, I think, right in the proposed budget that'll soon go before the community, which is to say that we are adding another psychologist, not in the same manner that we've recently added a psychologist, which is to say to support our therapeutic support program, but in this case, specifically somebody to come on board to chair CSE meetings and to alleviate the responsibility of some of our administrative team who have needed to be very involved in those meetings, so that our administrative team that oversees the entire staff who provide a variety of services to our students can really be focused on the needs of our students and meeting those needs in the classrooms. So I guess, maybe the way to say this is that one priority is to be sure that we have the very best possible levels of and quality individuals to manage the work associated with making sure that every student's needs are being met, whether it's through an IEP or through a 504 or through a combination of interventions in a classroom setting. That was only one priority. Another, I guess I would say, priority or opportunity would be to invite neighboring districts through a tri-state consortium to review how we're doing in delivering our special education services and meeting the needs of all students. In the wake of the pandemic, this is something that we had undertaken back in 2014-15. We have the opportunity to work with a tri-state consortium periodically, and maybe this is yet another lens through which we can review what we're doing and make sure that we're best meeting the needs of every student.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela, for representing SEPTO and for asking that question. And one thing that we were excited about when we came to the district was the well thought of special education program in the district. We had come from a school in the city that was integrated, had a lot of integrated co-teaching classrooms, that was really dedicated to kind of having that. And so that was an important value. My sister's a special education teacher in Brooklyn. That's something that has been a part of my family always. And so I had the privilege of speaking with a couple SEPTO parents over the last couple weeks and hearing about what's been going on. And I have a couple ideas. I think, one sort of big idea is I think we should have probably a SEPTO seat on the Board of Education, so that we always have that represented, and that's integral to how our district is making decisions, right? That's an important part of our programming, and to have a parent voice that's representing that, I think would be really important. Short of that, I think that we need to kind of really listen to what the parents say that they need. And what I've heard right now is I think we might need to relook at some of our safety and ways that we handle discipline in the district around that, and teacher training on that. Another issue that I've heard is how do we make accessing special services easier? So one thing would be maybe like some form letters that are available for if you need to apply for a 504, or going from CPSE to CSE, making that transition a little bit easier, more transparent for parents, so that they know how to do that. Because a lot of parents have spoken of how they've had to get an advocate involved to get services for their students. And that it sounds more complex than it needs to be with a district that's supposed to be and does really value special education in the district. How do we maybe have more classrooms where we can push students in a little bit more where they need to, and not just have I know we have various different models, but also thinking about how we also keep students at the same school and not have to switch because the programming needs. So thinking from the different user perspective. So from the student perspective, what do students need? What do families need? What's realistic for the district? And putting that all together into our policies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marjorie, would you like to?
Sure. I think a lot of the ideas that Alana mentioned are excellent. I think that, for me, when I think about the role of the board, it really is to ensure that we have the very best people at every level of the district to meet the needs of our students. So, I think it's a very interesting observation to think about, do we need somebody who is dedicated as a SEPTO representative on the Board of Education? I think that's an interesting perspective. I think in terms of, really, what should the board's priorities be in terms of as the board is currently constituted, I guess I would just emphasize, meeting the needs of every student to the best of our ability. And I think back to last summer when we were able to open our extended school year program in person after just such a short period of notice from the governor that would even be a possibility. I feel very grateful and proud of the leadership we have for our special education department and the team of staff that are working so tirelessly to meet the needs of kids. And I think this is just one more area where we need to be able to take a step back and look at what is working and where can we improve, like so many other areas for all students.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know we're running over. It's a little after 8, but I think we have 2 more questions that we would like to ask, and then we would like to get to the Q&A. So if that's okay with both of you. Okay, great. Now we're gonna, Doreen, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Hello, I'm Doreen Parsons Siciliano, and I'm one of the Katona Elementary School co-presidents. My question is, do you believe KLSD should have a gifted education program? Why or why not?
And I think we actually, right, it's Ilana, it's your turn.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about that actually for the district. I grew up in New York City where there were gifted and talented programs. I went to one of the specialized high schools, so I've been in them and outside of them. I think there's pros and cons. I think we'd have to think about why we would want a program like that, what the benefits are, what the downsides are to it. Ideally, we have an enrichment program. The school is robust and meets all students where they are, right? I know that's a commitment in the district right now. And I think the question for now is, how do we support teachers to differentiate in the classrooms? How do we help them make sure that all students are at the level they need to be? And then how do we make sure that they're able to engage students that are more advanced? I spoke to a former president of the school board who's told me that at one point in the high schools, there weren't separate AP classes, but within the classrooms, they were able to sort of offer differentiation, which I thought was a very interesting model that I'd never heard about. So you don't kind of pull kids out, but within the classrooms, you continue to differentiate and meet the student where they are and engage them where they need to be. I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious what parents think about that. Why, I guess I have a lot of questions about it, and I think it's a really interesting one. And I just want to say that I think where I see the board's point, or the board's role in this, is I think as a board member, I see myself as the liaison with the community and bringing community concerns up at the board. And I also see myself as a decision maker, and where a big decision point is with the budget, right? So I think where the board allocates resources reflects the values of the board and where we want to put our money, right? And so I think that's where we make a lot of decisions with the budget. And I know that a lot of the budget is set, right? Any municipal or government budget, a lot of it is already spoken for. But that discretionary portion, where you allocate that, I think speaks to values. And I think that's where we have a lot of power as board members. And obviously we have to agree, but that's where all the decision making is happening. And I think paying attention to that and knowing that, and I feel excited to be part of those discussions with such a functional board.
I think this is one of those areas where individual board members have different opinions, but in recent years, we have really tried to defer educational decisions of this nature to the educational experts, and not just to our superintendent, but really to our entire district office staff and our principals and our teachers. And I think that the impulse to even want to ask about, should we or shouldn't we have gifted and talented type programs is an important one to honor. And I think a conversation about why would we want to have this, why wouldn't we want to have this, is important. For me, it actually goes back a little bit to something that I mentioned earlier, which is around sometimes feeling as if ELA and social studies are subverted to math and science. And this is not something unique to Katonah-Lewisboro. I think it's really important to provide that context, but the whole notion of accelerating in math and science as compared to any meaningful tracking, let's call it, if tracking can be meaningful at the secondary level, in middle school or in early high school around ELA and social studies, I think it's just really an important conversation to have around, why do we accelerate in certain areas and not really track in other areas, which isn't to say we aren't differentiating, because I believe our teachers really are always differentiating their instruction.
30 seconds.
But I think that's where it's complicated. We don't offer gifted and talented, but we do offer certain opportunities at certain junctures to basically track students and to enable them to make decisions that actually then have consequences later in high school. So, I don't mean to be dismissive of the question or to suggest there's no role for the board, but, I think this would really be a conversation that at least the current board would want to invite with our educational leaders and our educational experts to better understand the costs and benefits, not just materially in terms of the budget, but in terms of the impact on all students and all classrooms, and why we should or shouldn't do it.
Ilana, do you want to respond?
Sure. I would just want to add to that. I mean, I really hear what Marjorie is saying about including the people who we are empowering to set our curriculum and do that work. And I think they're obviously important stakeholders in the conversation. I think just as important are parents in the discussion, and our other parents in the district like myself who went through New York City or New York public schools were in programs that were tracked and were in programs that weren't tracked, and what the experience was like, and that perspective and what we think our children need in the classroom. I think I've had the experience of having kids that need additional support and need additional differentiation and challenge in the classroom, right? So I really think the question is, like, I'm curious where the question is coming from, and what is the significance of gifted and talented? What are we trying to achieve by bringing or not bringing in a gifted and talented program? I would think that all our children are gifted and talented up here in Lewisboro. We're just like in Lake Wobegon, right? I mean, we all think all our children are gifted in different ways, right? So are we, I think as Marjorie was saying, are we only gifting and talented in like reading and math, or later on math and sciences? Or do we have the opportunity also for that in all fields? And how do we let students grow and explore the places where they have a passion for learning? And get to their learning edge in all those subjects always. So I think like that's the question I'm more interested in than a titled gifted and talented program.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our last question before we get to the Q&As. Taryn, would you like to go ahead and ask that question?
Sure, one more from me. So the question is, why should people who do not have students in the district vote for this budget?
Well, there's always going to be a school budget. And so to the extent that our community members are responsible for and required to pay their taxes, I can say that this is a budget that responsibly supports the students of Katonah-Lewisboro, and we want our schools to be run responsibly. We want them to run well and to meet the needs of all students. And this is a budget that responds to the pandemic circumstances in which we find ourselves by ensuring that we're prepared to meet a variety of scenarios in the fall. I think this was a very challenging budget to develop because the past year and a couple of months now have been so very different than previous years. But I do know that our administrators and staff members worked tirelessly to anticipate what might it take to come back in the fall, to be able to educate all students in person, but also reserve the right and the possibility to offer or to continue offering remote learning. We're not certain yet whether that's something that will be required or that we will be expected to provide. And also to
30 seconds.
Be positioned to support students in a variety of new ways as a result of either learning experiences that we need to strengthen because students were not able to access learning in ways that they previously had, and they may need to catch up, or because they need different emotional supports. We're hoping to support our students in a variety of ways responsibly. And it's a budget that takes into account the needs of our students for these times.
Okay, great. Thank you so much both for answering our questions.
Should I answer that question too?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping in right. Sorry about that, Alana. Go ahead.
I mean, I agree with everything Marjorie said. Obviously, the Board of Ed worked incredibly hard on the budget. And I mean, this year budgeting was different from any other year. I mean, I guess last year you budgeting is really great when things are the same, but when you're in a time like now where you don't know the future, it's hard to do budgeting. And I think the board has put together the best budget possible given what we know, what we anticipate. And I would also say that, public education only works when everybody supports it. It's not just for people who have students in the school. The public education system is beneficial for everybody in our community, right? We want to have students who are educated, who are thinkers, who know how to be engaged, productive members of our communities and of our societies. And that's what public education is about. So even if you don't have a current student, it only works when everybody in the community is supporting it. So I feel optimistic that people will come out and vote for it again. And I hope that they do. And I want to thank the board for all the work they've done over the past 2 budget cycles, which have been, I assume, like none other. And hopefully we'll get to more normalcy for the budget that I get to work on. But I do love some of the contingency stuff in there that allows for, you know, some flexibility in staffing,
30
given what we don't know. And so I just think that I appreciate the work that went into it. I know it was a very hard year to do it.
Thank you. Marjorie, would you like to build on that?
I guess the only other thing that I would add is that there are community members who I think maybe feel disappointed when they don't see the budget going down from one year to the next. And so I think it's okay to just say that out loud, that I'm aware, and especially because our enrollment was declining and now has plateaued. And I guess I would just say, to reassure those community members, that over the past 8 years, the Board of Education has taken very significant action to actually experience a budget decrease, a significant budget decrease for several years in a row. And we continue to benefit from those actions financially without compromising the quality of the education that we're providing to students. In fact, in some cases, we were even able to improve the quality of education we provide to our students. So, I realize that won't satisfy everybody, but it is the reality. And when you look at our school district's budget in comparison to school district budgets across the region, Katonah-Lewisboro really is making its community members proud by very responsibly managing its budget year over year, even if in this particular year it's resulting in a modest budgetary increase.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And at this point, and I apologize if anybody had plans tonight, it's now 8:15, but we just would like to take some time to answer the questions that have come in. Unfortunately, we won't get through all of them, but we have cut and pasted them, and we'll actually email them to Marjorie and Ilana so that they can respond directly to those questions. Doreen, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. So the first question is from Erin Angelilli. Now more and more people are able to be vaccinated, and if they so choose, what is your stance on mask mandates for the next school year starting in the fall?
I'll say I don't mind staying later. I'm home already, which is one of the benefits of this technology. It makes it a lot easier. You see my kids coming in and out for parents to participate. And I think we should continue to think about how we use that and allow for parents to participate. I don't think it matters what my position is. It sort of matters what the Department of Health is saying. Like I'm not a public health expert. So I think we need to be following what the guidance is from the state. Right now, it seems like masks are still important, even with vaccination. We haven't gotten to herd immunity. That's my perception of it. I would obviously follow the guidance of the state, and I think the district has done a very good job of interpreting that and continuing to update that, especially as it changes. Once we put in one policy and the next day that changes, they've been very flexible in doing that and doing the best to keep up. Obviously, we want to keep our students safe. We want to keep our teachers safe. We want to keep the staff safe. That's the #1 priority. So whatever we have to do that, we need to do.
Thank you. And I should have mentioned, we're just going to cut this a little bit shorter, so we won't do the third. So we'll just let Marjorie respond, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Sure, I see it similarly. I don't anticipate that I will be in a position to make a decision on this issue. I think the question does invite another question, or it illuminates just the complexity of what lies ahead, which is to say that the question reads, now that more and more people are able to be vaccinated, which leaves open the possibility and likelihood that not everybody is going to be vaccinated. And what are we going to do about that? So, I think in addition to this question around masks and what is the mask protocol likely to be in the fall, there are other corollary questions that we will have to ask ourselves, and that actually the State Department of Health won't answer for us around, again, how can we invite our families to be present in our schools when some people, but not all people, have been vaccinated, and it's not entirely clear yet what the status of children below the age of 16 is, although it's looking more promising. So I think there's a lot of complexity in this question, but on the face of the question, no pun intended, with regard to the mask, I totally agree that it's not likely that my opinion would much matter, because this will be something that the Board of Education will be advised on best practice and what is required to keep everybody safe in school.
Thank you. Okay, next question is from Grace Feeney. What is your opinion on the state's proposal to implement critical race theory in our schools?
And jump in, whoever wants to answer. Marjorie or Ilana, do you want to answer it?
I think I take this question maybe to be coming from a place of, I'm not sure, it's hard to know, but maybe from a place of opposition to implementing critical race theory in our schools. I think there's actually more like negative press around this than there is actual implementation work around this at the moment. And I think what I would just say is that back in 2015, Andrew Selesnik provided a presentation to the Board of Education and our community that was called A Context for Public Education, that included many, many slides, but one of the slides showed KLSD at the center, and then it showed all of these vectors and these individual forces that are at play in thinking about what do we want KLSD to be and how do we want to educate our students. And we might be at a point with regard to the pandemic and with regard to our work for equity and inclusivity and racial justice, where maybe we take a step back and we look at some of the new events that have been experienced in the past year and a half and revisit that context for public education and that context for educating students in KLSD. Because like with regard to the pandemic, and I know this is not exactly the question, but it's not even clear, would that be a vector? Would that be one box, just like APPR, the evaluation program, or would it actually just completely upend the entire slide? So I think this question, again, just invites bigger questions around, how the work of our schools can best move forward to meet many different dimensions and our responsibility to educate students so that we're producing competent citizens for our democracy.
I think that's a great answer, Marjorie. Look forward to working under your leadership on that. I agree. I think you're right that it's probably coming from maybe opposition to it. And I would sort of question back, what do you mean by critical race theory, right? I'm familiar with it as the academic theory. I know it's a big talking point right now, but is there a particular curriculum that the questioner is asking about? What are the concerns about it? What is the understanding of what that means? Given that, I think there's a couple things that we can all agree on, right? We want to prepare our students to be informed and engaged global citizens. We want them to make sure they can speak thoughtfully on issues of the day. We want to acknowledge, that racism and inequality is just as much a part of the world that we live in as some of the natural phenomena that exist in the world, right? These are all things that are part of our lives. And so I think there's probably a lot of different ways to teach that. And the district's been doing that for a while, right? The state has a mandate since 2018 for this, culturally responsive, sustaining education framework. So it's not necessarily new. I think it's just being termed new and being like sort of a point of contention when I don't think that there's necessarily a ton that we might disagree on in that. And again, I think this is where we should probably have some more community conversations about this. And, you know, I've heard it, people have asked me a couple times, and I keep sort of saying, well, what do you mean by critical race theory? Tell me about that. Have you seen it in the curriculum in particular? Is there a concern about it that you specifically have? Let's talk about that and see. Again, I think okay. I don't know. I mean, I think this is a bit, people clearly want to talk about it, so we should have an open forum discussion about it. That would be my last point on it.
Sorry about that. Okay, next question. This is from Meredith Black. What do you believe the BOE's responsibility is with respect to the curriculum choices the district makes, particularly when being informed by parents that there are concerns?
Marjorie, I'd be curious to hear your answer, because I have it sort of as a parent perspective, but not having served on the board yet.
I think it's always the Board of Education's responsibility to listen to concerns and to ask questions of our educational experts. You know, I think it's generally held that the Board of Education doesn't have direct purview or authority over curriculum implementation or curricular decisions beyond, you know, the occasional textbook adoption or something that has budgetary impact. You know, that being said, I don't think it's a completely bright line. I don't think the BOE can just absolve itself of responsibility for curriculum at large, because clearly, you know, this is what we're doing. We're educating children, and that entails bringing children to the table, bringing teachers to the table, and a curriculum. So it's at the very heart of everything that we're doing all the time. And yet, you know, again, I think in at least recent years, the board has worked really hard to defer to the educational experts on
That is time.
areas that are really more in their purview, and where we have high trust that they are making good decisions to best meet the needs of all students. That being said, as I mentioned at the outset, I do think it's certainly the board's responsibility, because I think the question is about responsibility, to ask questions and to make sure that the answers are satisfactory, that we have evidence that our students are learning, and that their education is moving in the right direction. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. It's now 8:25, so we do have to let our host, Kimberly, go home at some point. So I would like to say, I know we haven't gotten to all the Q&As. We do appreciate everybody attending tonight. We will actually get your questions to Marjorie and to Ilana. I believe that, I'm not sure we have email addresses for everyone. So if you don't know Doreen personally and Precious, could you please just put your email in the Q&A if you feel comfortable doing that, or you could email one of us and let us know what your email is.
Kathy, I know we need to get off. Can I just add a quick?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. I didn't know if you wanted to add to that.
To the closing. Yeah, I agree. And I think that there is a lot of expertise, I know, in this community of people that work in education. And again, so as I said earlier, I think when we don't bring everybody's voice to the table, we lose our perspective. So I think the parent perspective is really important in curriculum discussions. And one idea I heard from a parent who's a teacher in the community is that perhaps we should have a regular, you know, I know there used to be a curriculum committee. Maybe we need to have a regular cycle on which we evaluate our curriculum, and that the evaluation happens with a committee that has multiple stakeholders. So the administration, obviously, teachers, parents, and other community members and experts on that committee, and that we evaluate the curriculum on a cycle so it's predictable for teachers. So it's not like all of a sudden there's uproar and we're going to reevaluate one curriculum, but there's something that's predictable about it, so teachers know that every whatever, 5 years, that a particular curriculum is going to be looked at again for relevance, for efficacy, and we might adjust it at that point. And that kind of cycle allows us to make sure that it's still relevant, it's still working, we're engaging the community, and that we get the best curriculum, because pedagogy changes over time, right? Different things come in and out of fashion. And I think the board could be somebody that authorizes something like that. The board's not going to necessarily be the ones making the final decisions, but authorizes and gets a recommendation and then implements something like that. So that's my thought on it. I know there's a lot of concern around the reading curriculum in particular. I want to sort of acknowledge that I think it's something that needs to be looked at. I mean, the parents' voices need to be heard in that. If some students are not learning to read, that's a real issue that we need to think about.
Great, thank you. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't know if you wanted to answer that question. So at this time, we're going to close. I would like Marjorie and Ilana to both make a closing statement. And it's up to you. Marjorie, do you want to go first?
Sure, if you'd like me
Okay.
to, sure. Okay, I'll just begin by saying thank you so much to Parent Council for hosting this forum, and thank you, Ilana. It was very nice to meet you. We hadn't yet met, and I appreciate your remarks this evening. It has been an honor to represent our community on the school board, and I want to thank you for entrusting the Katonah-Lewisboro School District with your children's education. This past year, as we can all attest, has been challenging, and uniquely so for schools in ways that I don't think we can yet fully articulate or understand, and possibly won't be able to fully appreciate for years to come. But in the meanwhile, this is the only opportunity that we have to provide a K-12 education for our children. And I do wish to reassure you that I go to bed every night feeling the enormity of this responsibility, and I wake up with it every day. Most nights it is what keeps me up at night. I know there's no medal of achievement just for thinking about a challenge from every which angle, but I do hope that it provides a measure of reassurance to know that I have developed deep understanding of the challenges that we have faced as a community and as a school district, and that I have worked daily to foster an environment on our board conducive to developing solutions, conducive to continuous improvement of our schools, so that they reflect our educational priorities and values, your educational priorities and values. I've sought to foster an environment that reflects respectfulness and the respectful coexistence of competing viewpoints and competent, consistently well-informed decision-making on behalf of all Katonah-Lewisboro students and community members. I understand the structure of public schools in our region and how to navigate constraints, relationships, education law, and executive orders so that we can act quickly and safely to continue providing the best possible learning environment to our students. I sincerely hope that you'll entrust me to continue to do so on behalf of our community and our children. And again, I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Ilana, would you like to close out?
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for having me and including me in this conversation. Thank you, Parent Council. Marjorie, it's been wonderful to be in discussion. I'm really looking forward to serving with you on the board. Yeah, it feels like a real honor. I mean, I'm really excited about these discussions. When I decided to run, I felt like this was a really unique opportunity, right? We've never had a disruption in our education like this, and I hope we never have it again. But I think it provides an opportunity for us to really ask those questions about what's working and what's not working. And as Marjorie said, how do we build it back better? And I think one thing that I'm really excited to bring is to bring that parent voice and to bring more community process into how we build back better, so that it really is more inclusive of everybody, of multiple perspectives, of different languages, of different types of learners, of different type of parent households, to make sure that the district really works for everybody and really does its best. So I'm really excited to be a part of that. As I said, I've worked on all sides of government. I've worked in and out of it. I think that those skills, doing budgeting, my facilitation skills, my community process skills are going to be assets to the board. I'm really excited to also think about how we communicate better to the community. I do a lot of popular education when I do workshops around how government works, and I'm excited to bring that around explaining to the community why the budget is important, how most of the budget's actually not debated every year. It's pretty much set, and how we should have more meaningful discussions around the discretionary portion of the budget. And I look forward to learning a lot on the board. and also to bringing us to sort of the next level, because I think that this is an opportunity for change in a way that we probably haven't had before. And so I'm excited for that. I'm excited to work with Parent Council. I'm excited to get going with the board. Looking forward to the election May 18th. I hope everybody participates. Last year's turnout was incredible, and I hope we get that again this year.
Thank you so much. Oh, there's a nice tone. Thanks so much, Ilana and Marjorie. And thank you, Parent Council, all my colleagues in Parent Council for helping us put this together tonight and developing the questions. And a big thank you to Kim in the district office for helping with all the technology and helping us set this up. We really appreciate it. And thank you once again to all of our attendees for watching us tonight and sending in your Q&As. And we promise that we will get them over to Marjorie and Ilana so that they can respond. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank
Have a
you.
good- Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Thanks,
Night,
Kim.
everyone.